All right, we now welcome on the Second Swing Thoughts podcast, Jake Montgomery. You know who he is, fitting manager at the Minneapolis store. Jake, we're recording this right after the playing of the U.S. Open, so we got to talk through the winner's bag a little bit. And I think it's one of my favorite bags on tour because JJ Spaun, thrilling win, but he's got a mix of brands in there that's pretty cool. And I think what we always try to preach Second Swing is, for the most part, a player should have multiple brands in the bag to get like peak performance. And so to see him kind of with a wide variety is pretty cool. Just from, overall, from what you know about his bag, his game, and obviously how he played, what are your thoughts on JJ Spaun and what he's playing?
Yeah, I mean, I love to see a player have multiple brands in the bag. Especially, I always tell people, if you're not being paid by the manufacturer, there's no reason you should have every club in your bag be one brand.
Yeah.
There's just so many clubs out there that offer a variety of performance benefits that, again, you really should not have the same brand all the way through. Before I started working for Second Swing, I did. I had the same brand all the way, just liked one in particular and just kind of kept it that way. Kind of came in, learned what fitting was, and realized, maybe that's not the smartest decision. And now I have 5 different brands in my golf bag right now.
Yeah.
So seeing a variety of brands in there is a very good thing. I'm not shocked to see at the top of the bag that Titleist GT3.
Yeah.
One of the fastest drivers out right now, especially guys at PGA Tour level speeds. They need something that's going to help reduce that spin rate, which is why that GT3 has been as popular. But, I mean, we also see a lot of GT2s out there as well. Typically what I'm finding, if a high-level player is coming in, they usually can play either option as long as spin isn't really high. But the GT3 is a little easier to shape. So if you have a player that really likes to kind of turn one over, play kind of a heel fader, it's a little easier to do that with that driver.
Yeah, I think we saw that from Spaun. Obviously he hit probably 2 of the most impressive tee shots of his career right when he needed to there. 17, the short par 4, almost hitting the pin, rolling 15 feet by, setting up that birdie. And then 18, he's got the one-shot lead, at the time, one-shot lead. Needs to hit the fairway, and he just hits that perfect, butter fade down the middle. And it seems like that's his go-to shot, and the GT3 allows him to do that. He's also got Fujikura Ventus Black Velocore Plus 6X shaft in there. Another one that I'm sure that we've done a bunch of content on, and why that family is super successful there. Getting into his Fairway Woods now. This is another different brand. So he's got 2 TaylorMade QI10. This is the standard model, not the tour. And the 3-wood at 15 degrees, 5-wood at 18 degrees, and it looks like in both he's got the Mitsubishi Diamana, the PD 70 and 80 TX. Thoughts on those? I think there's the QI10 family. I feel like had a really good feedback and results, and from our fitters just on the Fairway Wood family. There seems like they were pretty solid.
Yeah, I mean, especially on tour, that core QI10 model Fairway was so popular. I mean, you saw so many guys that were sponsored to play a certain brand of clubs, but they would sneak that 3-wood in. I think a lot of players just kind of like the way that it looked and kind of set up at address is just very clean.
Yeah.
But it performed really, really well. I mean, when I'd had customers in, it was very fast. It got very high in the air, and it was really forgiving on a miss. Like you could hit a toe ball, hit a heel shot, and the spin rate wouldn't fluctuate a crazy amount, which, I mean, especially at their level, they're just looking for something that's going to give them the same performance every time, which is why I think, again, that QI10 Fairway has been so popular.
And I think there's something to be said, too, about, you mentioned how popular that was on tour, for guys to, at that level with their speed, still play something that is, quote unquote, a core model, or a forgiving model of a 3-wood or a 5-wood. To see that is kind of strange in a good way for TaylorMade. I think it's also worth noting that, I think the one thing that maybe fitters were a little bit, I don't want to say frustrated by, but the one knock on these was that at the time, or they weren't adjustable, or they're not adjustable, right? So in the fitting, it made it a little difficult for you to get that into the hands of maybe everyday players sometimes. Obviously on tour, these guys can get it built however they need to have it built. But now the QI35 series does have that adjustability. But yeah, really good to see QI10 in there again. And as you said, I think a lot of these tour player contracts, some of them have full 14 clubs where they're playing, right? As you mentioned, some have, I think you can kind of, pick up some context clues from Spaun, with the Srixon hat he's wearing, right? That he's probably, got maybe irons and wedges, but then he leaves the rest open to whatever works best. And so you saw that scenario work for QI10 and a lot of tour players out there as well. Combo set for the irons here. We get into that Srixon set, and we got to just get your feedback on, in general, the ZXi family of irons, because he's playing them. It's more or less exactly what I'm playing as well. I have actually a ZXi 7 4-iron, and he's got the ZXi 5. But the Dynamic Gold Tour Issue X100s, your thoughts on that setup there? It's probably a pretty popular one.
That's a combo that I probably don't go a week without selling.
Yeah.
ZXi 7s with X100s. I mean, both of those options are extremely popular, especially X100 shaft. I mean, that's kind of the, no pun intended, the gold standard for an extra stiff shaft when it comes to irons. But the ZXi family as a whole is just so, I just keep saying it, consistent. That's what these tour players are looking for. They don't want spin and ball speed to fluctuate a lot because they want to know exactly how far a certain club is going to go.
Right.
I would say the ZXi 7 is the most forgiving, consistent club that I have seen. The smaller in club head size that you go, the more consistent it is out of the middle. That's why you see guys on the tour playing MBs,
right,
and why guys on Sundays are playing G430s that are just a lot bigger, deep, hollow cavity.
Yeah.
But the problem with those more forgiving irons is they're less predictable on a well-struck shot. So for a tour player, they might have 5 yards of variance between each shot, and for that, it's unacceptable. But for an average Joe like us, where we don't hit it out of the middle every time, we need something that's going to bring our miss hits a lot closer to our good shots. The ZXi 7 especially is such a good combination of both of those. I mean, I have fit 15 handicaps into ZXi 7s, at least in the lower portion of the bag, where even if we're not hitting it perfect, we're still seeing pretty good ball speed from it, but it's not crazy jumpy. And that's not to say that it's not a hot iron. It's just not going to all of a sudden go 20 yards past the shot that you just hit. And then having the ZXi 5 4-iron in there, that I think is just probably more of a peak height play. The ZXi 5 has a lower center of gravity, which helps launch the ball higher. A little bit faster ball speed from it as well will just, again, kind of achieve more peak height.
Yeah.
And oftentimes I'm kind of going to that split set just for more ball speed reasons as well, where for the average player, we want to see about 5 miles per hour gap in ball speed between each club. For some players, once we get into the 6.54, that can get a little closer to 4 or 3 miles an hour. We're kind of getting a little bunched together. Putting that hotter, bigger iron in the top just kind of helps build that gap back up.
Right. And then for him, obviously, making sure that gap between, say, his, the ZXi 7 5-iron and then the 5 wood that he's got, making sure that whatever club is in there is right in between and fills the gap perfectly. And for him, it was the ZXi 5 4-iron. And as someone who plays ZXi 7, it's not actually kind of cool to see Spaun win, but I also, to your point, ZXi 7 is not the smallest iron out there. If you need like a super thin top line and a thin sole, ZXi 7 probably isn't for you if that's all you're looking for. But ZXi 7 delivers in the performance. The new forging process they have, I think it gives it really soft feel. And yeah, it's forgiving. It's consistent for the category that it's in. I'm not surprised to see that iron has success. It's had a bunch of other wins this year as well. Guys like Sepp Straka winning with them. So kudos to Srixon. They've really, since the original ZX series, I feel like they've been among the elite in terms of irons that you've seen in the fitting bay.
100%. I mean, I would dare to say I think they might be my most sold iron brands since that came out. Because, I mean, they just span the whole kind of player category so well. I would say, Ping has definitely kind of improved that area with the release of their new blueprint line. They have definitely gotten more into that kind of high-level portion of the bag. I mean, they will always dominate the more forgiving side of things.
Yeah.
They've come a long way there, but just as far as spanning all styles of golfer, Srixon really has a club for everyone.
Yeah, yeah. Now, diving into Spaun's wedges, and he's got a little bit of a unique build-out with the wedges, and I guess the question I'll have for you after here, I'll just dive into what he's got. Cleveland RTX Zipcore with his gap wedge, 50 degree. Then he's got a Cleveland RTZ, which is their new model, in his 54 degree. Then the RTX 6 Zipcore with a 60 degree. Just in general, on building your set of wedges as the same model throughout versus something like this that might have a couple different ones in there. What is your perspective on that? Is there a better way? Is having all of them the same better? Is it okay to mix it up the way? I mean, obviously for Spaun it works, and he's got them built, specifically for him. But for the average player coming in for a fitting, how would you go about that discussion?
I mean, I would say for the average player, the only reason I'm really doing that is maybe they last year bought a sandwich they really like, and this year they want to get some new clubs. Like let's say they bought an SM9 last year, and they want to come in and get new wedges for the 56 and for the 50 and the 60.
Yeah.
And they have some very specific specifications they need to get to: length, lie angle, shaft, where we'd have to order something.
Okay.
That'd be the only reason that I would put someone into, I would say, different wedges across the board. If I had to guess why he's doing it, I think it probably just comes down to feel.
Yeah.
Especially with wedges. I mean, that's such an important component of this. Your 50 degree, that's a lot of partial shots where you're kind of holding stuff off. You really just need it to be comfortable. Same thing with a 60. That's a wedge that you need to replace the most, but once you find a wedge you like, it's really hard to get rid of.
Yeah.
So that would be kind of my assumption as to why he's playing an older model. And then kind of in that sandwich playing the new RTZ. That could be as well that that's the wedge he uses the most.
Yeah.
Wears down the grooves the most. Needs to get something new in there.
Right.
But yeah, I would, for higher end players, usually we're just kind of seeing that they just really like what they were in, and they don't want to see a change in that part of the bag.
Yeah, actually, on that note, we recently were on the Ping Tour truck, and we kind of did a video on our channel about some of the wedge builds for those guys. Specifically, we were with Matt Kistler, one of the guys on the truck, and he went through the wedge builds of their L.A.B wedge or 60 degree for Hovland, Finau, and Harris English, and two of them were actually playing a Glide 2.0 still. And so they were able to build those out still because those guys were like, this is the wedge I got to play.
Yeah.
And it's because they're so used to it, right? They know the feel. They have a certain expectation of how it's going to perform. And so that's, again, similar to probably when you see guys using older wedge models, you see a lot of SM8s still in play from a few years ago. Probably that reason there. All right, so now I know this is, for you, probably the most exciting part of Spaun's bag. The putter. So this zero torque movement, it keeps chugging along. It's not slowing down. I know in terms of fittings in the stores, in terms of we can talk sales, we can talk just popularity in general, but now L.A.B has a major championship under its belt in terms of being used on tour. Spaun had the L.A.B DF3 in the bag. I know you have one that you will play with. So give me your thoughts on the L.A.B DF3 and I guess how this might help as well with this movement that, again, doesn't appear to be slowing down.
Yeah, I mean, I've played a DF3 for the better part of a year now, and I can safely say it is the best putter I've ever had. Putting has always been an area of golf that I have struggled with. Now, this is going to be a very personal testimony. You need to try it for yourself.
Yeah.
But anything inside 10 feet, like my buddies knew, there was a pretty good chance I was not making it. And it was just all mental. And then I tried everything. I went to a Jailbird last year. I had a Scotty Cameron Blade before that. I had a TaylorMade Spider before that. Trust me, I tried everything. And I got a DF3 in my bag, and just something about it, like I can't explain it. It just feels like it's on rails. Like it's kind of guided throughout the whole stroke. And I mean, that's just kind of the zero torque feel. You see more and more players kind of being open to this style of putter. It's not the prettiest thing in the world. Like I'm not afraid to admit that.
Yeah. Well, that's the fun thing is L.A.B, the CEO, we had an interview with him, I think a year and a half ago now at this point, and he said the same thing. He's like, yeah, our putter's probably ugly to a lot of people, but it works. It's kind of the
100%.
idea. So if you can get over that look, which I think you're at that point now, and it works for you.
Absolutely. I mean, within a week or so, it just started to look normal to me. Like you kind of get over that look, but it really just helps keep the face square to your path. And that's where most players' misses are coming from. We use TrackMan at our Minneapolis location, and face angle is pretty much the number one thing I'm focusing on throughout a putter fig. I want to try and get that consistent and stable. If it's half degree closed every time, great. Play that. We don't need to change that. But if it's half open, 1 degree closed, 2 open, like just kind of jumping around, that's where you just have no idea where this kind of putt is coming off the face. In my experience fitting L.A.B putters, that is the number one area where they excel is face angle stability. It just makes it so much easier to keep that face square when it's not kind of moving on. You don't feel that torque in your hands quite as much. It usually does take players probably 5-10 putts to kind of get used to using something that's center shafted and has onset, where they've just never seen anything like that before. But when you can get over it, it's really, really, really useful.
So, and speaking on the onset part, we also have to bring up Spaun's, the unique part about his L.A.B putter specifically is if, you look closely, the L.A.B DF3s have a stock sort of grip to them that are, I guess, I don't know how you describe it, but they sort of, add to or they're
It's a
designed
2-degree
for the
press grip.
onset, right?
Yep.
So, but his doesn't have that, and so I guess from that perspective, how does he adjust his setup to make up for that, or I guess what is he? Because he has basically it's a Scotty Cameron grip on his L.A.B DF3.
Yeah. So I mean, there's about 2 degrees of shaft lean on that putter.
Yeah.
The way that a lot of players kind of address that is he just kind of press his hands a little bit more forward to kind of counteract for it. We do have one fitter that uses one that has just a normal Super Stroke grip on there. And what he did actually is he left it slightly closed because he felt that when it was square on, it was sitting very open.
Okay.
So he closed the grip up a hair so he can press a little bit, and then it just kind of lines up square. So
Okay.
I don't know how he has his grip aligned by any means like that,
Yeah.
but there are some fun things you can do with these putters grip-wise. You can re-grip them and it doesn't throw the balance off too much as long as we're not putting like a counterbalance plug in the top of that or something like that. But I think he just really likes the feel of a smaller grip, and
he also has
doesn't necessarily
crosshand,
like that
so there's
offset on
maybe
it.
some level of press there,
For
maybe
sure.
or something like that he's counteracting it with. But so yeah, the first major win for L.A.B, and that movement will continue. I imagine there will be some more major wins where that came from. You're seeing a lot more guys on tour, a lot more big names, at least trying it out, putting it in the bag, whether it's a L.A.B or you've seen the Spider 5K ZT in a lot of players' bags as well. It's another popular one.